it's Danielle Frank from Beauty Uncovered podcast. And today we are going to talk about the science of the soul. Before we get started on that, if you have not subscribed yet and you love our content, be sure to hit that subscribe button because we want to make sure you're getting alerts to the newest episodes. And we have some great guests coming up. Also, if you haven't rated us or written a comment, we would appreciate that too, because this is a great way for us to get the word out. But in the meantime, today's guest is Saloumeh Bozorgzadeh, and she is with Sufi Psychology Associates, which is a nonprofit. And originally she was coming on, or I was thinking she was coming on to talk about caring for our caregivers, which is a program that they have in a lot of different hospitals to help a lot of those first responders, those caregivers that are in our hospitals and have been working so hard the past couple of years to really help them with any kind of mental health issues. With that being said, it's been a rough couple of years, everybody. I mean, we have in many ways been carrying on the weight onto our shoulders. And as things are, I guess, normalizing, I sometimes feel like this is when we start to feel it, right? Like it's kind of like when you're working, and then you're like, oh, good, I have a vacation. But the first couple of days you have a cold. It's like your body has been working on high octane for so long and now it's shutting down. Well, I have winded up having a great conversation with Saloumeh about this. And I really am excited for you to hear all the things that she says, the tips that she gives in order to help bring balance and being present in the moment. And wow, great conversation. So with that being said, let's get started. I feel like we have so much to cover today. I'm so thrilled you're here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Well, I, first heard about you from a mutual friend, and she was telling me about how you were doing something called caring for caregivers. But really, I think I want to dive into a little bit more than, not saying that I don't want to focus on that, but I want to dive into the whole concept of Sufi psychological, and that it has spiritual aspects along with psychology. I love this because I do feel like the world is kind of crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And it's I don't know if we're just exposed to it more through, we see things now through internet and things, and it becomes more scary, or if it's just become more scary. But there's a lot going on.
Well, I think that with I can't say we have to blame everything on the pandemic, but I think a couple of years of, things have not gotten totally back to normal. There is some normalcy, but not totally. And I think that in many ways, a lot of us, our psyches have been kind of changed by all of this. We kind of carry it on our shoulders.
Yeah, Danielle, and I know everyone says, we're not going back to normal. And it's very true, right? And that's kind of like a reality of how we live, right? We never go back. We're never exactly in the same place again. Right. So it's kind of accepting the fact that whatever this becomes right now, we're living it. This is the now, and this is what it's like. But so I am a clinical psychologist and I see patients, but being a psychologist, I will say that the effects of this time and the way it's affected people's psyche and like our spiritual selves and our bodies, everything has changed. That I do think there's going to be a lot of healing that we need to do as individuals and then collectively as kind of the human race as well.
Personally, I have kind of like a theory in all this because I think that a lot of us that winded up having to go home, we had to kind of really reevaluate a lot of things, what's important to us, the self-care. But it's kind of like you're saying, it's almost like when you start to look introspectively and look at things and what you've accepted in your life, what you don't accept into your life, all these things come bubbling to a head. And then suddenly you're going, oh my gosh, I have a lot of going on in my life and I don't know how to deal with it. It makes people angry.
Yeah. And especially when you think about all the ways that we avoid sitting with ourselves. You know, we do it through so many different mediums, right? We have the TV, we've got things to listen to, podcasts, we've got radio, you know, video games, we've got socialization, anything we can do, social media, anything we can do, overworking, right? To keep from being alone with ourselves. Because as you said, that is something that happens. You know, I oftentimes give my patients the assignment of spending a weekend without any of these distractions. And it is tumultuous.
Oh, I can imagine.
Right? Like there are thoughts and feelings and old recollections, memories, things, beliefs, that narratives that we have that's buried really deep. And those start bubbling up to the surface and it becomes really unbearable. But to be honest, you know, it's so helpful for, you know, yeah, you have to go through the pain of it, but to get to the other side where one, you've taken a look at all of these things that you don't even realize you've carried with you that are affecting you, but also two, you know, now you can begin to sort through how much of it is mine, how much of it are these narratives and things I've gathered from others, right? And people are usually shocked to hear that, you know, the way we talk to ourselves is learned. We don't grow up being mean or hurtful or hard or harsh to ourselves. That's not innate. What it is it's someone else's words that then we internalize and then it becomes our own voice. So having to look at that is really painful oftentimes.
I find that so fascinating. It's funny. My mom used to always say to me that she's like, listen, everything that you think and the way you think about yourself is passed on from me and then passed on from your grandmother and your great grandmother. And she says, at some point or another, you're going to have to kind of shed all that. You know, it is a really fascinating thought, how much we're exposed to, and especially now with social media. And I am just as guilty.
Oh, me too.
I am the social media queen. Like I am on TikTok far more hours than I really should be, but it does kind of, there are days where I really sit there and I go, ooh, I got to get off this for a while. Yeah. It's hard because it does kind of enter into your psyche.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, so within Sufi psychology, we talk a lot about how our this physical identity we have, this outside identity we have gets formed. And, you know, we're born and we are these little blank slates. Like we have there's genetic code there and everything, but then we begin to form a sense of ourselves by essentially our mind is taking pictures of everything we've seen, everything we've heard, everything we've encountered. You know, it all goes into a bag that I slap my name on it and that's me. And every time I come in contact with something new, I go digging in this bag and I'm like, oh, this is like that. Okay, I know what this is. Or, oh, this doesn't make sense. This must be wrong, right? Like our entire sense of everything that we think we are all comes from what we have gathered. So when you think about what you're exposed to, when you think about how it is that some people could be so varying in their thoughts and perceptions, and something that is so obviously incorrect to me can be so obviously correct to someone else, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So when you think about the fact that we've collected and gathered all of this, then the question is, what of all of it, what is actually real? And who am I separate from all of this?
It seems too difficult to disentangle. Well, like if you really do think about all that, and in a weird way, I kind of understand it because I was in a very, shall we say, unhealthy marriage for 20 years, incredibly unhealthy. And after it was done, I had to have that conversation in my head where I sat there and I go, okay, I say I'm not good at something, or I say I don't like something. Is that me, or is it the other person that was writing my dialogue for me? Yeah. So I understand that, but in so many ways, it goes so much deeper. How, in what you find in your practice, is a way that a practical self-care, I don't know, is it self-care? I don't, just a way to be able to start that dialogue with yourself.
Yeah. I think, there's a couple of things. So one right now, I'm going to tie this in a little bit to kind of the work that we're doing with healthcare workers, right? So right now, Sufi Psychology Association, we have this program going on for healthcare workers in terms of helping them rebalance. It's both used in hospitals prior to the pandemic, but also now to help kind of realign. And part of this is a lot of the time is as we're going through the different workshops is you're also trying to figure out, or each person for themselves has to really figure out, okay, all of these things that I think I need in order to be balanced, right? How much of it is genuinely what I need? And how much of it are the shoulds that I gather from what I think is correct, So I think it takes an ability to be courageous and explore. So Sufi psychology is basically taking the teachings of Sufism. So Sufism it's a spiritual practice that is the entire goal is for each person to know themselves, to know their true self. So not just understanding how all of this mishmash contributes to how you act on this physical dimension and how you relate to the world, but also that ineffable spiritual part of us, the part of us that has remained constant and stable, even as you have changed throughout the relationships you're in, even if you have changed through becoming a teenager and rebelling and then conforming and all of these things, but there's a part of you that has remained there, right? That's remained stable. And so with Sufi psychology, with the principles of Sufism, the belief is that the more you, and at the Sufi school, it's talked about. So Professor Sadegh, he was a great Sufi master of the MTO school, and he would say that you're the laboratory, you're the experiment, and you are the scientist. So it's all with you. Wow. And really through this practice, at least, I grew up in it, and I was going to these schools of Sufism and getting these lessons, and it really made it okay from a young age for me to question these things, and not only question it, but to be, and I use the word courageous because I think it does take a lot of courage to put some of them aside, especially when we start getting into topics which when we're talking about Sufism, even into topics such as your belief system, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do I even know, this is good, this is bad? Where am I basing that on? And what is it really about? But within the field of psychology, so we took this practice, these Sufi teachings of going within, of finding that stable point, and we brought them into the mental health field, into psychology, modern day psychology. Current psychology is wonderful, but it's really focusing on your actions, your thoughts, and your behaviors, your thoughts, and your emotions, right? This is what we're usually focusing on. So this takes it a little deeper.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that you've just said that really struck me is the fear and that how scaring, that's not a right word. It's very hard to let go of your upbringing, so to speak, of your family's belief system, what they tell you how you should be. We all kind of cling on to those things to a certain extent because that's our tribe, right? Mm-hmm. But I find this whole concept so fascinating. And what I love is I find that at least the younger generation, we talk about Gen Z, they are so open to this. Yeah. So open to this. I feel like, I'm 50, so I feel like that we're starting to come into it because, we always were kind of like, whatever.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, to your point, Danielle, I think part of with that fear that, I know fear is such a weird word, but whatever, that's all we have to use.
It's not the right word, but
But I think part of that is also, this is how we've made sense of our environment, right? And to question that, at least I know for me, when I know that, I remember in my own personal journey, right? Which totally still on, totally mess up all the time, like work in progress over here. But I know that there was a period where I was really kind of sorting through some stuff. And I remember thinking very like the stuff that I had gathered from, for example, my father and I are really close. He's got certain beliefs, right? And it was like things that I didn't even notice I was taking on, but it was like beliefs about what to value in the world, And what was scary for me was like, how do I even navigate the world if I don't have these, right? Because this is telling me good and bad, right and wrong, right? So my fear was, one, how do I navigate the world without it? And two, what do I put in its place, and what if I'm wrong? Right? What if I'm like, no, fire is good, let me touch it? Like, who knows? Right?
No, I agree entirely. It's very funny because with my father, the best way to describe him is he was just so good, so good, so kind, would have just done anything for anybody. And in some ways, I mean, it is such a great lesson. I think there should be so much more kindness in the world, and empathy and all of that. But in many ways, I think I almost took it to an extreme where I wasn't allowing for my own self. And it was always give. And you were saying a lot of shoulds. Like I had a lot of those, like, oh, well, I really should do this. And it was always about someone else. Instead of looking at whether or not it was good for me. So for as wonderful of an example he was, you kind of have to kind of rebalance that. So that way you're taking care of, like putting on that mask on your face first before your kid, that on the plane.
Yeah.
And it was really hard because he was good. You know what I'm saying? It was just good. So you think, oh, well, of course I'm going to follow his example. But yeah, it wasn't working very well for me.
No. I mean, and I think we find our way sometimes, I think if we're willing to look, you do find your way. And I think part of, what you were asking earlier about what can you do? How do you even begin? I think it's one, really, truly having that intention and being open to looking at yourself, being open to understanding and wanting to find it more. So in the MTO school of Sufism, so there's a thing that there's a prayer that is said, which is typically when someone begins this path, there's a prayer that they pray to, whether it's God, the universe, existence, whatever you want to call it, that there is energy, whatever the name is, doesn't even matter. But the prayer is that please show me the teacher for me on this path. And I'm totally butchering it because it's all done in a different language, but please show me who the teacher is on this path so that I can better know myself, so that I could better know you, right? So within Sufism, because it's a spiritual tradition, it's a path of self-knowledge. Ultimately, the theoretical belief is that if you know yourself, you know God, God, energy, whatever you call it. However, the thing about Sufism is it's all experience-based. So as we kind of mentioned, it's not a blind follow. It's not a do this and you're good or do that and you're bad. And therefore, part of this is you don't even know what that is. And until you discover, the one thing you can be absolutely certain of is you exist. Yeah. So you start with there and you start with uncovering that and unraveling that. And even in this wellness space, I mean, Danielle, think about like all this incredible research we have on wellness, right? Do this is going to be good for your health. Do this is great for your skin. Do this will help you, blah, 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 right? Absolutely wonderful. But even with that, you can't follow blindly, right? You take that and then you have to implement it and then tweak it for yourself. Who am I?
Figure out what works for your life.
Exactly. And it might not be textbook, right? It might not be the 8 hours of sleep. I might be a 6 hour sleep person and I'm fine. But if I'm trying to force this notion because I've read that this is correct, I mean, essentially it's kind of another form of religion, right? I've read this, it must be correct. I'm going to force it on myself. I must sleep 8 hours a day. You have to experiment and
then you just wind up feeling like a failure when your body's saying, nope, you're getting sick.
Right. Then you're doubting yourself. What did I do wrong? Why do I not have self-discipline? What's wrong with me? But ultimately it comes back to yourself, and having and beginning to understand and know yourself so that you can make decisions for yourself.
All right. So I do want to dive a little deeper into the caring for our caregivers, but I do want to ask one thing, and I might be asking for a friend, me. Where would someone learn more about Sufism and because I'm fascinated. I'm completely fascinated.
So there's the MTO School of Islam. It's Islamic Sufism, MTO School of Islamic Sufism. You can do that on mto.org. I can give you these websites if it would help. We've got workshops throughout the year, the Sufi Psychology Association. So even sufipsychology.org, we do at least once a month, we do virtual workshops and then in person, depending on where we are. And then there is the Sufi meditative practice called tamarkoz. So as you know, mindfulness stems from a Buddhist philosophy, a Buddhist paradigm. And so here, tamarkoz stems from the Sufi paradigm. So this practice also, it's the practical aspect of this path of self-knowledge. So through this practice, not only is it beneficial for your physical body, but you're learning more and more and more about yourself through an experiential component. So that also, we have an app and there's exercises online, and I could give you that website as well.
I would love that, because I do personally, I'm not really affiliated to any kind of religion or anything like that. Raised a Catholic, but I'm not necessarily associated with anything, but I find there's such beauty in different teachings. I'm constantly looking at them and I find that fascinating. And I've never explored Sufism. That's really interesting.
Well, and within the path of Sufism, it's not a religion. It's so funny to me because it's so much more complex and deeper that, people sometimes will ask me, what religion are you? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question.
I always say, I kid around. I say, I'm the Church of Danielle, which is so inappropriate, but I have my spiritual beliefs. A lot of it is rooted in, of course, where I was raised and everything like that. But in the long run, it's mine. You don't need to know anymore.
And it's really interesting because I've never met two, I've got friends of different faith, who do consider themselves religious. I've never met two that are identical. Everybody is so unique. So it's always hard for me because I'm always like, is it like what organization I affiliate with? Do you mean what, because then you look at the school of Sufism, right? And you've got people who identify as Christian, Jewish, Muslim, you have them all that are going there because this is about self-knowledge. So it really would, if you want to be a great Christian, you have to know yourself first so you can have steadfast path towards your Lord, right? So I think it's not something that is like a religion that's separate from everything else. It is a path of self-knowledge that you really need for anything. If you want to decide what field of work you want to go into, you still need to know yourself to know which direction, right?
No, and I appreciate that.
Yourself. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm excited about looking into it. So I do want to dive into caring for caregivers because as we were talking before we pressed record, my dearest, bestest buddy since I was 13 years old, she is a travel nurse. Yeah. It's been a rough couple of years. She wasn't always a travel nurse. She actually worked in a hospital in New York City or in New York. And I just remember in the beginning, just getting calls and she's I think she is probably one of the strongest people I know. I know that having to hold up a phone to a patient to say goodbye to their family. And the fact that she would sit there and hold their hand as they pass. Oh. I don't even know how she copes. I don't know how she does it. So I think it is wonderful that you have something for nurses and caregivers that have gone through a lot in the past couple of years.
Yeah. So it's called Caring for Our Caregivers. It was our initiative, the Sufi Psychology Initiative. We started in April of 2020. So right at the beginning of the pandemic. Our concern was, you know, prior to this, we've been doing a lot of work in hospitals and with residents on this concept of healthcare or self-care and what it means and burnout relief, and kind of using these principles of Sufi psychology within the practice. And when the pandemic came, our concern was, oh my gosh, like, what are people, they need resources. So we began to donate tablets, electronic tablets that were filled with the Tamakos method. So now the Tamakos method of meditation has been studied to show that it decreases stress and increases positive emotions in times of high stress. So we're like, this is perfect. A lot of my patients are, they are nurses, they are residents, and they would tell me, you know, at those very beginning, first of all, the fears that they had in those beginning days and beginning months was just, it was, I don't know how anyone can go through that. Yeah. But also they would tell me that if they had a break, which they rarely did, but if they had a break, people were like zombies. They were sitting in break rooms, just kind of staring out, as you can imagine, you know? Yeah. So we started donating these to the hospitals with disposable headphones, strictly for the purpose of the healthcare workers. So they have something in those moments, at least to get them out of this space, this stress response that they're in, right? We began, you know, with just a few hospitals, and then we started getting calls from other hospitals saying, you know, we read about you in this. Can you send it to us? We need it. We started getting emails from nurses. We started hearing from hospitals that we've donated to, asking it for their sister hospitals, you know, and it was like, people need something. So that's where it began. And then now, as things are beginning to quote unquote settle down, or so everyone thinks.
Is it though? Is it though? I still hear about how understaffed and how stressed, and they've been through so much.
So that's the thing, Danielle, right? The way our body works is, as I'm sure you've noticed in times when you've been really stressed, our system will rally and it will pull us through. Mm-hmm. Things calm down.
Then we crash.
We crash. We feel it. We see the effects, you know. And so right now I go to different hospitals. I do workshops at different hospitals, and we're seeing it. I'll have nurses saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm getting like eye infections and it won't go away. And I'm like, I know you've been in a prolonged state of stress for 2 years. You know, your system is crashing. And so we're seeing that. What's really difficult is, you know, these healthcare workers are typically, they're givers, right? They're the ones who would rather, they say, don't worry about me. I'm fine. And they'll give to others. So not only are they trained that way, but a lot of them are characteristically that way. So they oftentimes don't even know what they need because they haven't tapped into themselves for so long. So a lot of the work, you know, we are doing, Sufi Psychology is doing right now, is with hospitals. We have programs, and we're both going in and doing virtual of, first of all, redefining self-care. That was one of the things that we found was just really problematic. It's a word that's thrown around left and right. And when you ask people what's self-care, and they're like, I'll get a massage, I'll do this, I'll do that, which is
not that it's a bad thing, but
not bad. Yeah. But that's not really, here's the problem, you know, and so the problem is, if you have a giant to-do list, and if you haven't tended to all your responsibilities in the different avenues of your life, and you're like, I must self-care and go get a massage, one, it's not relaxing. And two, you come out with an even bigger list because now you've wasted an hour of your time, right? And you're not.
And on top of that, I mean, one of the things that I've always known is that you're taking care of something external. Now, don't get me wrong, it can help with your psyche a little bit, but really, in all honesty, that's an external influence. It's not that internal that's really going to give you that self-care.
Correct. So one of the things, and I think this might be good for your listeners to a tip, right? So when you're trying to determine what self-care is and what you need, is to first sit down with yourself, you know, sit down with a journal. Journaling is so good in so many, I'm sure you do it. I feel like you're a journaler. Yes. I know. Yeah, I'm getting journaling vibes.
Always. I always have, like, admittedly, I've got like 8 or 9 of them throughout the house. So
I always start a journal with like, this is going to be my journal for this, and this is going to be my journal for that.
And it always winds up getting mixed up. Yeah. Yeah.
But you sit down with your journal and you start writing about, you list the different areas of your life: work life, home life, family responsibilities, fun. Fun needs to be included. That is an important part of human functioning. Spiritual, if there's, if you're in school, or just even like these different components, physical health, right? Emotional health. And then you need to kind of ask yourself, honestly, at this baseline. So first we need to take a baseline. How am I doing in these different components, right? How is work? How am I doing at work? Do I feel balanced? Do I feel balanced in this aspect? And all these different aspects, right?
Dude, it's so funny. You said that, do you feel balanced? My first thought was when you go, how are you doing at work? And I'm like, I'm working really hard. I'm getting stuff done and I'm doing this, that, and that. Like, I'm not thinking, is it balanced?
Yeah. Well,
I think that's where a lot of people's mentalities are.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel balanced? Well, no, I feel too much here, or I feel too little. Or do you feel balanced with your physical health? No, that's probably a resounding no for many people, right? Because that's usually the first thing that goes.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so first it's taking a inventory and a fearless look at all of this, and then determining, okay, what are the things that need to switch? Okay. And this needs to be not a giant to-do list, which is usually where people go, is like, I'm going to eat well, I'm going to be a vegetarian, I'm going to like work out to 5 days a week, and I'm going to meditate 18 days, no. But
I don't feel very seen right now. I mean, always grand plans.
Yes, exactly. Right. So you look at and then you pick one thing. I'm going to do one thing for this week. One thing I'm going to focus on this week that's doable to begin to balance. So understanding that this is a long-term process. This isn't going to be little. But the fact that you have it in front of you, the fact that you have looked at it, the fact that you know there is a plan and action and that you're going to make these changes, that takes off an incredible amount of pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Then when you go to get your massage, you can actually relax and get your massage because you know that you're still doing what you're supposed to feel a little more balanced. You're not just ignoring everything.
I love that because I'm a big fan of bliss.
Yeah.
So I am diagnosed ADHD. So I tend to just kind of, I'm quickly switching from thing to thing. So one of my practices in the morning is to sit down and write my list of the to-dos, which is always like down to like, take a shower, brush your teeth, and I get to cross them off as I go along. But I also try to make a secondary or third list, which has to do is, like relationship, what is my self-care? In many ways, it is something that's a practice for me that is taking care of me. But also, with my son who's 12, I'm a single mom. It's sometimes hard to carve out those really like, I am present in this moment because life is chaotic. So I've come to the point where I write these lists and I have to cross them off by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it does help. It really does.
And I want to say one thing, and I don't know if anyone needs to hear this or if everyone knows already. It took me like 40 years before I realized this, and that there will never be a time where you've crossed off everything on a list.
Okay. Yeah. I'll admit that.
Like it's like settling into the fact that there's no such thing of, we keep these lists of all the things we have to do. And then we're constantly, God, it's just we're adding to it. And I'm not getting off of it. There's still so much to do. No, there will always be a list to do. Like it's a fallacy that we're going to kick this.
Oh list. Yeah. No, I admit I write down those little details because some of them I know. Well, one, because like, I'm sorry, sometimes I'll get so distracted, like, oh, that's right. I didn't take a shower today. I mean, it's just life, sometimes I get so distracted, but those little tiny things, being able to feel like, even though it's something so simple, brushing your teeth, putting on your makeup, it's some of it I know I'm going to do. I'm going to go on camera. I'm going to put on my makeup. Yeah. But I think the process of just being able to cross it off, knowing I'm not going to get to everything, but it's good to dream. It's good to dream.
As long as you're not holding it over yourself, right?
No, usually it just carries on over to the next day.
It just carries on and there'll be and it's fine. It's fine. And every day you might rearrange and say, well, this takes a little bit more priority. The deadline is coming up. This is going to move up. Fine.
Sometimes it's something as simple as just drinking water because, coffee. And just that reminder to take, because I know that's external, that's your body, but in many ways it does affect everything else too.
Well, and Danielle, your body has to carry you through, right? I can be on a spiritual journey all day and night. If my body if I'm not tending to it for it to try to push me through a little, it's distracting. Like, I'll tell you this, a few years ago, all of a sudden, I don't know, it was like I got so tired. I had this incredible sense of fatigue, so much fatigue. I could barely get myself to work. I was just sleeping all the time. And what was really frightening for me in that period was all the things that I thought I cared about, that I cared so much about, I always put first. None of them mattered. Mm-hmm. Like, all of a sudden, like my meditative practice that I'm like, I love this. This is my thing. I just didn't care. Anything that I valued, family, didn't care. Nobody, I couldn't care. And at first I was like, am I depressed? What's going on? I couldn't figure it out. It turned out my iron levels were so low that I couldn't have this was the first time I really got sick. So it never occurred to me
that it was physical.
It was physical, and it affected me on this massive level. But it was also, it was a really important learning moment for me, because at that point I was also working a lot with oncology patients who had cancer, and I'm like happy and bubbly all the time. And, and then it occurred to me that, oh my gosh, like, they can go through periods where they can't do anything. Nothing matters anymore, when you're nothing. And it really just gave me like a slight insight into a different way that people might be functioning, and how I need to shift not only my perspective and how I'm working with them, but also, the tools and techniques I'm using. Because if you don't have anything, there's no care, it's hard to do. You can't do, right? So what do they need in those moments? But it was the big lesson of, whoa, like this, I've been young for my whole life. I've been like getting through my body. I push my body. It never like says anything, all of a sudden it was like, oh.
Well, it's funny because, and many of our listeners have said this, like they know I've said this, that, when I turned 50, it was birthday, going to celebrate all year. But I kind of wanted to be on this journey in which I am looking at those things and kind of reevaluating and maybe pushing myself a little bit, because I do want to be healthy and strong, both mentally, physically, spiritually, all of it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I noticed that I used to be a personal trainer. I used to be a fitness instructor back in the day. Now it's like, I don't even want to tell you what's on my Apple Watch and how many steps I've taken in a day. It's terrible. Mm-hmm. So I had to really look at it and look at sometimes my attitude during the day and stuff. It really was affected by how my physical health was, and what I was eating, how I was taking care of myself. So yeah, no, there's such a huge connection between, what's going on in your head and what's going on in your body, for sure.
So let me ask you this. Did your perspective on what you considered was necessary for your health change?
Yes. As I've gotten older, it has. It used to be, I just wanted to be hot. I want to be hot. I want to be cute. I wanted to wear that cute outfit. Now, don't get me wrong. I still like wearing cute outfits.
Sure.
But with that being said, I think part of it, my dad passing a few years ago, and the last couple of years, he was 86, but he struggled to move. My mom, she goes through that now. And I sit there and I look at life, and I plan on being around for a hot minute. And I want to be around for my kids for as long as I can. And so now it's more about longevity. I want to be that person that's really embracing life to the very end.
No.
And it's hard to do that when you physically feel like crap, right. I can't move around and stuff, but I've said this before too. I have, I fangirl girl over Iris Apfel. I don't know if you ever heard of her.
Yeah.
So she is a fashion icon. She's 100. And the first time she's ever been signed by a modeling agency was at 85. Her fashion has been showcased at the Met Gala. She is amazing. If you have a chance, look her up because
I will. Amazing.
I adore her. And all I keep on thinking is that this is a woman that's exploring life to the very end. She is just embracing it, eating it up, going for new experiences. And that's how I want to live. So if I want to be that person, if I want to live as that person, I need to be physically taking care of myself, not be a badass muscles, look great in a bikini anymore. I don't really care about that as much. I just want to feel good. And then even with, spiritually, mentally, I think it's about being more present in the moment and being open to things a lot more, still spreading the kindness out there in the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think, the more, I could speak for myself. So the more, for example, I do, let's say tamakos, right? This meditative process. The more I do these, right? The more and more I learn how to quiet my mind, which is a challenge with that. It's a challenge.
Meditation is not my friend.
Usually when people say that, I think that they're probably doing a method that doesn't work for them.
Probably.
And the reason is usually when people think of meditation, they're like, I'm going to sit and quiet my mind. That is a really advanced technique.
Oh my gosh.
Sit and quiet your mind, right? You need first to kind of learn how to navigate it first before you can get it to quiet.
Yes.
So we have like this practice called mental relaxation. It's one of the components of tamakos. And it's a really incredible concentration practice that teaches you how to focus your mind, shift it and focus, right? Actually, speaking of ADHD, we just wrapped up a study. We were looking at the effects of tamakos on attention and sustaining attention and stuff. So we're still doing.
No, I think that's fascinating because I got to be honest with you. And it makes sense when they diagnosed me. I always say my thought process oftentimes is like tripping down stairs. I'm like skipping over steps, jumping over here, banging into the banister, and then I arrive somewhere and I'm like, where am I? This is not where I started.
Right. So for you wouldn't want something that's quiet. Like you can't have something quieting right off the bat, right? You need more, you need it to be a little more active in the process as you learn to kind of rein it in, right? Then you can learn to kind of direct it. So anyway, as I've been like learning to do this, right? And I've been learning to quiet my mind, and it's amazing the things you see about yourself and the things that come up. But then you're like, my reaction speed kind of slows down to things. Not like if I'm driving, I don't like stop if I need to, but I mean more so like when someone says something and like my initial instinct is to, right? I might not like jump down their throat right away. I can like kind of like process, give a minute, and then also the more like you begin to see all the stuff in yourself that is so unperfect and really needs work. And like the times where you lashed out when you shouldn't have, and the times when you were out of control and it really, I think also gives a sense of empathy towards others. So it's easier to be kind towards others because you're like, I do that all the time too. Like, who am I to judge at this point?
Even the stuff that I don't know and I'm not experiencing and I don't completely understand. It is interesting how much more empathy that you can have when you're a little bit more present, grounded.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think so as well.
I love this conversation. And I feel like we just like talk about like falling down a flight of stairs. We went all over the place. This was fun.
I know. I feel like we could talk forever. There's like, give me another topic.
I know, right? I appreciate this. Thank you so much for coming on today and telling us. And before we go, can you tell me, if there are any other caregivers that don't necessarily have this at their hospital, where can they find this, the caring for caregivers? And also for our other listeners that are not nurses, like something that is similar, because I got to be honest with you, you're telling me what you're trying to do for caregivers. And I'm thinking, that could suit anybody.
Yeah. So here's the thing. We are an entirely nonprofit organization, right? We are completely donation based. Nobody gets paid, right? But as a result, we've got people who are happy to do workshops and all sorts of different things. So shoot us an email. Hey, like we've had this happen. We had somebody from Georgia who sent us an email. They were a teacher and they're like, the staff at my school is so stressed. Can you do a workshop for us? Absolutely. We went and we did one virtually for them. Or right now, some people who live in Texas, they're like, can we do something out here for everything that's going on down there? And we're like, sure, let's see what we can put together. So there really is no limit. We are happy to do it. The Caring for Our Caregivers initiative was specific to the healthcare workers, but
Yes.
honestly, we've done these workshops at universities. I just did one there's a corporation that reached out, and they have employees that are in Ukraine, and some of them are in Ukraine, some of them have family members that are in Ukraine, and they're like, I wish we could provide something for them. And absolutely, we just did a whole workshop with them. We're going to do another one. So we're happy to do these things. This is all for all of us, because this isn't our profession. Like our profession is separate. This is where we volunteer. It's a passion project. So yes, like you can shoot us an email. The general email is info@sufipsychology.org. I'd be happy to give my email address. If people want to reach out to me directly, I'd be happy to help out anyway.
We'll definitely have everything written in our description of this podcast. And thank you so much for coming on. This was delicious.
Thank you for having me. This was lovely. It was great talking to you.
Great talking to you.
All right. Well, then have a good one.